I will teach you how to play the Spanish game or the Ruy Lopez opening, which starts with the moves e4, e5, then white, we are playing knight to f3, and black is usually gonna respond with knight to c6. Afterwards, we play the bishop to b5, which is known as the Ruy Lopez or the Spanish game. And I have to say, just really briefly before we get started, that this is an opening with a lot of theory. I can probably make a video that is 20 hours long if I wanted to show you all the theory, so that's not what I'm gonna do. I will teach you all of the main concepts you need to know to start playing this opening. So you can do a little bit of more research yourself, try to find out your specific lines, and then choose what you want to play. So after watching this video, you should be able to go out and play this opening. So black has many options. That's also why there is so much theory, but we're going to start off with this a6 ID by black. And this is one of the most common moves for black, simply attacking our bishop, forcing us to move. You might be thinking that we are going to capture here, which is known as the Ruy Lopez exchange, and that is playable, but that is not what I would recommend you to play. If you want, you can always study this. You might be thinking, well, it's just quickly winning a pawn, but actually it's not so easy. For example, after a move like queen d4, yeah, this knight's gotta go, you get this capture, and it's a mess. So this is not what I like to play, but you can of course try to play this if you want. We are gonna play the bishop back to a4. And you might be thinking, why play the bishop to b5 if we gotta move it anyways? Well, the idea of this opening is very strategic. We are gonna try to do the best development we can, really slow build up, and then we are gonna try and take over the center. And the bishop is useful on this diagonal because at any point we can always throw our bishop at his knight, exchange it, and then try to capture here in the future. Or we might also remaneuver to a different diagonal. So black to play, of course, many lines, but we're going to start off with this idea of bishop to knight to f6. Sometimes you will just get an early b5. Players like kicking around your bishop. I mean, it doesn't matter. We are just going to go with the bishop here to b3, and probably black will develop the knight, and we can castle, and that's fine. Sometimes they also try to chase your knight early on. That's also sometimes possible. But then in those positions, they are dropping this pawn here, so you can just grab this pawn as well. But yeah, sometimes things can be complicated. For example, this queen takes g2. If you want to be safe, if you get this early attack, you can usually just castle. And even after black takes, it's not really a huge problem. Black is just wasting a lot of moves. Black doesn't really have anything going for them. And we are castled and we have these pieces developed already. But we are going to continue with knight to f6. So knight to f6, we're going to castle, pretty straightforward, just developing pieces, castling, logical moves. Black again has a couple of options. You might be thinking that, wait a minute, didn't we just drop this pawn here on e4? Well, we did, but this is like a little bit of a gambit, because yes, black can capture this pawn, but it's not going to last for long, because we can just play rook to e1, attack the knight. The knight has to move, and you can probably already see after the knight moves, wherever they go, they can be tricky, try to go here, attack the bishop, but after something quick like takes, and then here knight takes on e5, yeah, we are just up, I mean, we're not up material, but you can already see that the rook is facing off with the king, the knight is here, this is playable, but this is probably not what black is gonna go for, honestly, because this is not super great for them. You might also be thinking, well, what if I capture here with the rook? Can't I win this knight? Well, no, you cannot win the knight. For example, after a move like knight to e6, or even bishop to e7, because the knight is still protected, right? Okay, so that's that. So, okay, we are offering a pawn, but yeah, black is almost never going to take this if they know what they are doing, and black is going to continue development as well. For example, with a move like bishop to e7, we are still going to play rook to e1 because we don't want to leave this hanging for a really long time. We are just going to leave this hanging for a little bit, and then we are going to start defending it. Again, black to move, many things are possible. Black could castle, but at some point probably black will play a pawn to b5, kicking away your bishop, so you have to drop back. This could have happened earlier, or it can happen now. It can basically happen at any point. Whenever it happens, you just want to play the bishop to b3. And there's a little bit of a dynamic you have to be aware here, and that is that black often wants to capture your bishop, and as white, if you can, you want to save your bishop, so it doesn't get captured by the knight. And If black goes for early capture against his bishop, usually that just results in them losing a pawn, as we have already talked about before. And yeah, black's just losing. Black is just down a full pawn. Um, so black's goal is to capture this bishop, but they have to protect this pawn first. So they could play something like pawn to d6. And now as white, this is how I like to remember this. Black is playing this to protect the pawn so that they can release the knight and go after our bishop. And we don't want the bishop to get captured. So we are going to play pawn to c3. This just guarantees us that if black still tries to attack us, we can just drop back to c2, which is beautiful because we are both protecting this pawn a second time, and also you can already see that we have done some preparations for a push to d4 in the future. So attacking the bishop here is no longer useful for black. They are just wasting a move and our bishop is going to improve. And yeah, we just have a really solid structure. Black and castle, which is the most common move. We are going to continue with that in a little bit. Black players, especially at lower rating levels, also often like attacking your bishop, your knight with their bishop, pinning it to your queen. Okay, it's not really a problem. We can just attack them with pawn to h3. If they ever capture, you can recapture with the queen. No problems. The queen is a little bit more developed. Pawn is defended, squares are defended, so everything is fine. And if they play bishop to h5, what I like to do here is just continue and don't really worry about the fact that this knight is pinned, because honestly, do we really need this knight right now? I don't think so, because I mean, it's not going anywhere here. And this d4 push is a slow build-up plan. We're not going to push it straight away. So we're just going to push to d3, go for this structure. For example, castles, develop the knight. If they ever attack you, go back here. You just have simple plans like this. And at some point, if you think, well, my pieces are a little bit stuck, you can always go knight back here. And now you have opportunities to develop this bishop, or also go with the knight to here or here. So everything is still fine. But as I said, we are going to continue in this position just with castles. Everything is possible, but it's more about the IDs than it is about memorizing the variations, in my opinion. If black didn't pin your knight, you can always play h3. I mean, it just takes away another move by black. You might be thinking, well, can I not play this earlier? No, you cannot really play this any earlier. At least not in this variation, because we were still worried about our bishop being captured, and that was what our previous plan was all about. So here we are just going to play h3, because now we have the time to waste, well, quote unquote, waste a move, also to prevent black to go here. And the thing is, if we look at this for black, what do you think black's plan is here? I mean, black has a little bit of space on the queen side. They can potentially start an attack here, but other than that, there's not a whole lot that's going on for black. So oftentimes also the most popular move here is black playing, for example, knight to a5, trying to go after this bishop, but I have already told you that you can always go back with bishop to c2. And if black knows what they are doing, they're often going to play for early c5, because as we just said, black's plan is basically attacking in this rectangle. Black wants to play in this rectangle, activate some pieces here, push, maybe create some weakness. And white's plan is really just about central control here, and that is what we are going to try to go for. And the king side, usually nothing happens on the king side. Multiple things can happen for black. Also, of course, instead of c5 and many variations, especially lower rated players, you will also get the move bishop b7. But this is not always the best move, because, well, it blocks any other pieces from pushing down this file. And yeah, you can most of the time just play d4, get something like this, and you all of a sudden have a really solid central structure, which is what we want. And if black ever counterattacks later, this is something important to remember, this e4 d5 ID. That if we can, we are usually going to push, block up the center, and we have achieved our goal. We now have more space, and we also have more central control. But we are going to continue, as I said, with black playing this early c5 and still leaving us in the dark a little bit of where this bishop is going to go. But the plan for white is still pretty similar. And these positions, I mean, everything we wanted to play, we have already played. We were able to stop this bishop, we developed, we castled, we have the rook here, our bishop is safe, and we have done a lot of preparation work as well to push the pawn to d4. So pawn to d4 is a move that you can play. You could also play pawn to d3 if you want to be a little bit more slow, do a little bit more build-up by activating the bishop, maybe even the knight. But here in this position, you can actually just go for the d4 push as well. Many things can happen as usual. Black can, the most played move is actually queen c7, going with the queen here. As I said, black is trying to play in this rectangle, so black is activating pieces here. Or I think especially at lower levels, you are often also going to get captures, a lot of captures usually here. But in the end, you can just see that white has a more centralized knight. White now has two knights, the bishop is here. And sometimes even this is an interesting square for the knight, playing the knight to f5. And all of a sudden black has this really weak backwards pawn that cannot be protected. Well, actually an isolated pawn that cannot be protected by any other pieces. So this is a little bit of a target for attack, and white just has a pleasant position, more space, and a lot of opportunities. Yeah, so as I said, if they play queen, bishop b7, just push d5. That's also possible. But we are going to take a look at queen c7. And if you get this, that means your opponent really knows theory. They know what they are doing. But we don't have to worry. I would say still go for this structure. That was our initial plan. We just want to go for this setup, grab more space in the center, and also later on develop our pieces. So here black realizes that, okay, bishop b7, it's a bit useless, right? So black might play bishop to d7. Of course, nothing else is really possible. Black is a little bit cramped, but this helps them with their plan of pushing in this rectangle. And here, white, yeah, you have so many moves. You can do a lot of things. I usually, in these positions, like to play b3. You might think, well, why would you play this? We still have so many pieces that need to be developed. But the thing is, black does have a little bit of a plan here of pushing on the queen side. And since we already achieved our plan, it's not bad to just play something that also prevents black's plan. And black in many variations would like to put the knight here on c4 and from there try to influence our position. So playing b3 is not a bad move. You could also, of course, just move the queen if you want, or do something else. But let's say pawn to b3, and now, yeah, this knight doesn't have any future at all anymore, so it has to go back. Black still stuck a little bit in this rectangle, and also basically in these three ranks, that's really black's space, and we are more about the center. And here we can continue development. For example, bishop e3. Black is going to go for the plan, as I said, trying to push here. We can just play normal development, and it's up to black to try and create something here. But honestly, there's not much. These a4 pushes never really work because of takes. And well, you might think, did this achieve anything for black? Not really. I mean, we just have this open file that both players can work on, and the entire attack is already gone. For example, c4, and yeah, we just have everything. We have beautiful center, and black doesn't have any plans. If they ever play here pawn to b4, there's actually an interesting move here. Now we're going to put the knight in c4. And even if we blunder this pawn, it doesn't really matter. This pawn is not going anywhere. It's not going to be protected. We can pick it up later. We can grab some space. So the only real way for black to try and go for a breakthrough is usually pawn to c4. And that is where this pawn also comes in handy, because we can just take, play queen e2, and now we have a double attack on this pawn. It needs to be protected, but yeah, you can't really protect this. You could say maybe bishop here, but yeah, your bishop is just gonna get attacked. Even if you go here, yeah, everything is just problematic for black. So black basically has to drop this pawn, but we're not even gonna take it. It's not about this pawn, it's about total domination of the position. We can develop the rooks, and you can see that some tricks are starting to happen here. And let's just say just a random move by black, all of a sudden the queen is trapped. So that can also happen. Even if black plays something like knight c5, now we are going to capture here, and it's just a pleasant position. We are up a pawn, we have the open file, we have more space in the center, and white is winning. Now we're going to take a look at some other variations, and I will try to make these more brief, more quickly, because right now you already know many of the key IDs. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, and let's say again black plays a6, we go back, this, and here black plays something a little bit different. It's slightly different, bishop to c5. Does this change anything about our position? That is the question we are going to ask. Again, as I have said before, if they capture, just play rook e1. So bishop to c5. Well, here I'm going to play pawn to d3. And this is a little bit different, because usually you play rook to e1. But, I mean, the rook is leaving this pawn unguarded, and all of a sudden it's attacked twice. And you basically have to go back, or you have to go up. Yeah, that's not really what we wanted to play. So patience is also key in these positions. We play d3 now, we can play b4 later. And that's the most important thing to know here for white. Black's gonna counterattack, we can move, and I have told you before, if they try to be greedy, well, they are just losing a pawn. So they have to do some preparation work, like for example pawn to d6. Oops, now we realize our bishop might be trapped, so we are going to play pawn to c3, castles, and again, we still have an extra move left. We can play something like h3, and you can see that many of these ideas are similar. It's just about using your brain, trying to figure out what the difference is in your position between what I talked about, and then just play a very logical move, sometimes a slow move. It's all fine. We are playing the Spanish game, so we have time for slow moves as well. And I'm just going to show you something a little bit different here. For example, bishop e6. That's something we haven't really talked about before. Well, I would say you can just grab this, double up the pawns, and also this is now a weakness we could potentially attack in the future as well. And here we also have this interesting move, because if we look at this, what's a good plan for white? I mean, okay, you could play bishop g5, that's a fine move. You could try and develop this knight somewhere, but you can also play b4, and this is funny because we are kind of reversing the roles here. Black was trying to attack us down this rectangle, but now we are using the fact that their bishop is here to gain a little bit of space, kick away their bishop, a4, and now we are just breaking up all of their plans, and black will never be able to achieve anything anymore in this rectangle because we are now all of a sudden eliminating their plan. Let's say they take, we take with the queen, and yeah, the entire plan for black is basically gone already. But since black has this pawn now, black might be the one to play a little bit more in the center, and usually nothing's really gonna happen here. So let's just say, okay, the knight is under attack, right? Let's just say queen to d7, and we can just keep playing logical moves. Knight to b2, maybe black tries to do a little bit of a counter attack here, seeing if they can open up the rook. But again, we have this beautiful square for the knight, knight to c4. And you might be thinking, wait, are you not running in a trap? Nope. In this particular game, you can actually sack your queen for 2 rooks. And yeah, white is winning. Multiple moves are possible for black. I'm just going to show you one variation. For example, this. And okay, we don't have a queen, but we are still winning really badly, because black's position is just going to collapse. And there's a tactic brewing here. There's a tactic brewing, and I don't know if you can see it, but there is a beautiful tactic here in this particular position. And the plan is, let's say black plays this. Now there is a tactic. So if you want, you can always pause and see if you can find it. And the tactic is that we have a sacrifice. We have knight takes with check, also a fork. Takes, takes, another fork. We can take the queen, get something like this, and this is a position that is winning for white. And of course, if this didn't happen, if I just play a random move, we can kick away the knight. Yeah, the knight doesn't really have any good squares, and then you also get this check. And this is not even a check. This would even be a checkmate. So just to show you some different variations, I'm not going to say you're going to get this exact position in your game, but you have to know these positions. So we are just going to take a look at something else. Pretty similar setup, but black doesn't play pawn to a6. Black plays knight to f6, which is known as the Berlin defense, really famous, played by many super top grandmasters, top 10 players in the world, top 20 players, they all love the Berlin. So what are we going to do against this? Just a really solid play again. Multiple things are possible. You can castle and drop the pawn. I mean, there's not really a problem, but I don't like that in the Berlin specifically. I think it's better to play pawn to d3, protect this. Black's gonna play bishop c5, castle, and we have talked about this. d6, common move for black, trying to protect this, because otherwise there are always annoying things where we trade off the knight and then capture. Here, for example, this is a variation where you can just win a pawn. So black usually has to defend this before castling. And we can play, for example, again h3, taking away the square for the bishop. castles, c3. And you might be thinking, well, why are we playing c3 here? I mean, the bishop is not yet on a4, but you can pretty much play the same set of moves anyways. It doesn't really matter. Black might play something like bishop d7, and you can see that this is a little bit different because black is not going for their plan, but it doesn't really matter as white. We can still continue with rook to e1 as well. Black might play bishop pawn to a6 to stop our bishop from coming in. And there are other variations as well. They are also in a Lichess study, so if you want to get this Lichess study, top link in description and also the pinned comment will have a link where you can join our Discord group, and in the Discord group we have the Lichess studies. But I'm going to continue with the main lines, and at some point here we can play d4. I mean, it's always the plan. We can play d4 here. You can get an exchange. The bishop's got to go. Knight to c3, and yeah, I mean, we have the center, we have the knights, we have the rook and the queen, and we still have this pressure. So it's a good position to play for white. And if black ever attacks you, you can even drop back to c4 here with the bishop. And this is just beautiful. All we need is a bishop here, right? And then we have basically almost the golden setup. So next up is the Steinitz defense. So we're going to take a look at this as well. So we are going for the Spanish game. Black plays really early pawn to d6, trying to protect this. And again, you can pretty much play everything we have seen, but this is a little bit of a passive setup by black. So here I recommend to go for an immediate pawn to d4, because we can take up the center here. We can just play this. And if black captures, we can just recapture here with knight takes d4. And this reminds me a little bit of the Scotch game, which I also have a video on if you want to learn a little bit more about these structures. It's a bit similar. And all of a sudden we have the knight in the center, we have the pawn, we have double pressure on this one. Yeah, it's a good position for white. Black has to do a defensive move like bishop d7. We can develop here. You might get something here, and this is important. You can get this straight, and yes, you can take back with the queen. But I recommend that you first take this, this, this. And now we just have such a solid position. We have the queen in the center. This is annoying for black. They cannot really move the bishop, right? Otherwise they are losing this. We have this pawn, we can castle, and black still has a long way to go before they can castle. If they play something like knight f6, you can attack it with the bishop. If they play something like bishop e7, you can castle here. You can even castle long. There are so many potential things. Let's say we castle short, and in many games you are going to push pawn to e5, and that is the plan, because there are some tricks here. For example, if black captures, all of a sudden, bam, you take the queen, you take the bishop. Of course, this doesn't have to happen. Black can also be defensive, go back with the knight, maybe bishop f4. So many things are possible, but you can see, just look at this for black. White is going to win this. And then we are just, as a final position, going to take a look again at the Steinitz defense, which we just covered, but just to show you a little bit of a different line. So we're going to play pawn to d4, and here I will immediately play bishop d7. So black is not going to capture us, because of course black doesn't have to capture us. We are going to push d5. That was the entire plan from the beginning. So the knight has to move, and we can capture this, and then we can play c4. And look at this. I mean, 3 pawns in the center, all protecting each other. That's just a beautiful thing to see. Black has to play knight f6, knight c3, and where is this bishop gonna go? Yeah, the black position is not so good, right? Black has to play probably knight g6, so they can at least make a little bit of room for the bishop. Castle, and look at black squirming and trying to finally, after so many moves, get the king to develop. But we already have developed knights, we already have the center. We can continue. We can even attack on the queen side with pawn to a4. We can play pawn to h3, taking away this square, and black just doesn't have much. The best plan for black is normally to go with c6 and try to do a counterattack. Let's say we play rook e1. Black goes for something like this. And what I like in this position is knight e5. You can also capture with a pawn, that's fine as well. But I like going for the knight, because usually you will get this trade, because otherwise you would be able to capture a bishop. So you get this straight, and then I take with the queen, because I feel that whenever you grab like this, I mean, white is still better, but at the same time it can become a little bit boring. It can be become a little bit drawish. So I like going for this, 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 and now there's still a little bit more excitement in the position. We can get something like this, and now we just have a really solid structure and everything can still happen. We can still choose like where are we going to go with the bishop, maybe here, maybe here. We can develop the rooks. There are so many pawn pushes that can happen, so it's still an exciting position. If you feel like you want to know more about a specific variation and I didn't cover it, as I said, make sure to check out the Lichess study, top link in the description. You can join our Discord group. You can also leave a comment, talk with other players, because yeah, this video is just way too short to explain the Ruy Lopez in just one video, but I hope that this was a good basis for you to now start playing this. If you enjoyed this, definitely subscribe, leave a like, and as always, I'll see you in another video. Bye!